My name is Jacob Antony, and I'm the founder of Syfy. So if we look at the internet, it has undeniably changed the way that we live our lives, completely transforming the way that humans communicate. However, with the introduction of AI, it's getting harder and harder to trust these communications online, as it's getting easier and easier to push misinformation and fakes. This issue of digital trust is a growing concern. Currently, there are two main approaches to this issue of digital trust: centralized networks and distributed networks. The centralized system approach, illustrated by industry giants like Apple, Amazon, and Facebook, offer a high level of account security. However, these systems operate as isolated ecosystems, making interoperability extremely limited and making it extremely difficult to determine human or non-human accounts entering their ecosystems. In the case of distributed networks, often utilizing blockchain technology, these systems offer enhanced transparency and reduced reliance on intermediaries. However, these systems are having trouble in gaining traction, with Bitcoin's value layer being too simple to warrant the transmission of information, and Ethereum's smart contract system being too complex to warrant adoption on a large scale. This led me to begin looking at natural distributed systems for a solution to this problem of distributed trust. Before the internet, humans built trust through reputation. Reputation is built through interactions that occur over time, not personal data such as a government ID or an iris scan that's provided. This history of interactions is what makes a reputation possible. Looking at our own relationships, we see that the people we trust that are closest to us, we trust through a history of interactions. Looking at naturally occurring ecosystems for another solution to distributed trust, we see the mycelial network and its ability to communicate information and nutrients amongst ecosystems. This network of physical connections gives the system a sort of memory of information flow and nutrients transmission. This principle of natural interconnectivity is not only illustrated in mycelial networks, but across the universe and even in our own brains as well. So using our own brains as a thought experiment, we can try and just imagine how hard it would be, if not impossible, to identify new incoming information as true or false without previous connections or informations to use as building blocks for validating new information. It is impossible for us to verify new information without having the previous memory of information to verify that information as true or false. This is what led to Syfy, as there is a great demand for an openly verifiable memory for the internet. Syfy provides an openly accessible trust network through a network of openly verifiable connections. This network of openly verifiable connections may be used as information pathways to act as a sort of memory for tracking the flow of information through the entirety of the digital space without the need for confirmation through a third party. This system allows people to not only track the flow of information, but gives each person a sort of digital fingerprint, quantifying their presence in the digital space. So if we look at some natural systems, here we see a network of mycelium, a tangible network of connections that the mycelial network functions on. This network of connections allows the flow of information, and even when the flow of information is not currently happening, the pathways still exist. Looking at other natural systems that also illustrate the same principle of connectivity, we see the universe itself, with the cosmic web illustrating a very similar principle of interconnectivity. Even on the most personal scale, we see our own brain, illustrating the same principle of interconnectivity, with our neurons heavily reliant, if not completely reliant, on the physical connections that allow the transmission of information and also the history of transmission of information, providing us with our memory and ability to form cohesive thoughts. If we look at the internet, the first thought may be the internet is also built on connections. And while the internet is built on connections, there is no history of these connections taking place. Once information transmission has occurred, the connection is terminated, meaning there's no history of the information flow, which essentially translates to no memory for the internet. This is where an openly verifiable memory for the internet comes into play. Relating each ecosystem in the internet to a mycelial node or neuron, there is a demand for a network of openly verifiable connections connecting each one of these ecosystems. This allows the flow of information to be tracked and verified in an open way through the entirety of the digital space, meaning that trust can be facilitated without the need for trusting a third party. What do I specifically mean by these connections? I keep mentioning connections over and over again. Well, when I reference connections, I'm referencing the flow of information. And with the flow of information requiring a source and destination, this source and destination relationship is what makes up a connection. Through creating a record of these connections, you may track the flow of information from any point without the need for trusting a third party. It's this network, or this reliance on connections, that's completely integral to the function of Cyphy. Cyphy contains a distributed ledger of these connections, acting as almost verifiable bridges for information to travel across. These bridges can be verified from anywhere by anyone, providing a flow of information that may be tracked without the need for trusting a third party or taking somebody else's word for it. Since this system, or these connections, are stored on a distributed ledger, the system does require some form of distributed consensus. Currently, the two approaches to distributed consensus are proof of work, illustrated by Bitcoin, and proof of stake, illustrated by Ethereum and many of the new ecosystems coming out. Proof of work, as many have probably heard, uses massive amounts of energy. Here we see one of many Bitcoin mining facilities, massive facilities that exist with the sole purpose of validating the Bitcoin network. When we look inside these facilities, it gets even more scary, with floor-to-ceiling stacked with ASIC computers, all burning energy 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This consumption is only projected to increase, which led to the inception of proof of stake. Proof of stake is the consensus mechanism utilized by many new chains. And while this system does provide advantages in power consumption, this system has its own sustainability issues. With it being based on the acquiring of assets and the pooling of assets for compounding interest or compounding passive income from staking these assets, it results in a system not too different from the current banking system. This is a system where the rich automatically get richer, and a system that discourages spending, as people are rewarded for holding on to their assets. This led to the inception of proof of presence. Proof of presence is a consensus mechanism based on the mycelial network and its ability for the cells to communicate with each other. Proof of presence is based on the relative communication of each node in the network. What this means is as the network scales and gets more competitive, each node's ability to communicate increases as a byproduct. This translates to a system where the network naturally gets faster and more efficient alongside the progression of technology and innovation. This is a system that's not resistant to digital innovation, but rather enhances it and works alongside it. It almost grows like a natural system in the way that it naturally grows alongside technological innovation. Additionally, this system, since it's reliant on communication rather than computation, allows the system to be highly resistant to the computational benefits that quantum computing may present, making it the most quantum secure solution out of the three consensus mechanisms. Since this network is distributed, it is built on tokens. Cyphy's trust tokens, however, act as fuel for facilitating digital connections that are openly verifiable and interactions that are openly verifiable throughout the digital space. Trust tokens represent the ability to verifiably interact, compared to the traditional token use case of pure value transactions. Looking at building with Cyphy, we see that the internet functions on an IP port system. What this means is IP defines the source of information, with port defining the channel that information is transmitted through. Cyphy's connections work in conjunction with this IP port system perfectly, with IDs being able to supplement IP source of information in an openly cryptographic manner, and the connections being able to verify the information channels in an openly verifiable manner. This fundamentals approach gives builders maximum flexibility as they are able to develop in the way that they are familiar with the current infrastructure of the internet. In fact, development flexibility is so high with this system, you can actually combine decentralized and centralized systems together, even if the centralized system is a previously existing ecosystem. This means you can add decentralized channels throughout previously existing central ecosystems, bridging the gap of centralized and decentralized systems and uniting the benefits of the two. Through this system, builders are able to enhance the digital environment rather than rebuilding it from scratch. In fact, flexibility is so high that not only can you enhance the current ecosystems, but there are also a multitude of new possibilities for development that now are possible. These range from gaming to digital asset or credit systems, to community building applications, and general distributed web applications. Even location-based services, something I like to call plasma caching. So if you imagine geocaching as storing information across physical space, plasma caching allows you to create verifiable caches of data throughout digital space that are openly verifiable from anywhere. Additionally, as we previously touched on, this system may be used for secure, self-maintained digital identities as a sort of reputation for the digital space that anyone may verify. This is a system that functions on your actions, not your personal data, keeping your physical identity safe while your digital identity remains secure. If we look at the history of natural systems and the history of complex distributed systems, we see that these systems have existed much longer than humanity has existed. This leads us to the conclusion that these natural systems are much more reliable than anything humanity has currently created to date. Additionally, with the importance of maintaining trust in the digital space and the vulnerabilities that are presented when trust is controlled by a central authority, it is extremely important we facilitate a trust solution that is unanimous and not reliant on a third party. This is something that's essential for maintaining freedom in the digital space as we spend more and more time online. This is a system that allows trust to be something that's inherent rather than something that's given. Currently, Siphi's testnet is live and being hosted privately. In the new year, we will open a small funding round for select participants that will fuel the initial public infrastructure for the openly accessible memory for the internet, in which case the openly accessible memory for the internet will be accessible to everyone. Thank you.